Good afternoon. My name's David Shearing. I'm from the School of Performance and Cultural Industries. That should give you some clue to my research being based within theatre and performance studies. I am generally excited to talk because I am really passionate about a developing field within the cultural industries that's become really focused upon immersion, participation and experience in cultural events, which is basically the heart of my research project. My research project is titled Audience Immersion and the Experience of Scenography, and I'm going to unpack those terms. For today's talk, I've decided to give a subtitle, which is In Performance, Space and Design Move Us, But How? And that seeks to articulate the precise concerns of how space impacts upon the body. We are all moved by space. It controls us, it affects the way we interact with each other, it separates us, and it brings us together. Scenography is the term that relates into performance, that relates the objects of performance, such as lighting, sound, bodies, and space together. That's the particular field that I'm working within. So scenography can literally mean a drawing into space, a drawing with the scene. This is where I make my major contribution, or main contribution. Scenography is often seen as a pictorial concept. Analysis so far in this particular field is concerned with visual representations of design. I'm interested in the embodied sense of design. How does design make us feel? How does objects make us move? And that's the questions of my research project. So who am I and how have I got to this so far? Well, I'm a theatre director and designer, and I've been making work for the last 10 years in performance design. I make very intimate experiences, often with small audiences at any one time. I use high and low technologies using sound, spatialization to immerse audiences. I use video projection in environments as well. I'm going to talk you through a bit of the context, which at the same time as making this practice, it's become mainstream practice and actually very big business. But little is understood as to the nature of these experiences and the lasting impact, potentially, of what it's like to be in these works. So the first piece I'm going to talk you through is a piece by Alefa Eliasson, which was staged in the Tate Modern Turbine Hall in London in 2003. The piece in which the audience went in to the space was a giant sun, which is shortly. Here it is. Here's the piece, slightly faded. But as the audience went into this particular project, it was filled with mist. 2 million people went into this particular performance and or design, art experience, and they engaged in really interesting ways. What happened is the audiences started to come together and play and socialize in really interesting ways. Often an art experience is a one-on-one experience with an artwork. Here, it's a shared collective experience. And the objects of design made the audience move in really interesting ways. So that's a fine art practice. A theatre practice at the moment, to give you a bit of another context, we can take this company called Punch Drunk. They're in London at the moment. This is a multi-million-pound production. Hundreds of thousands of audiences are going to see this. This is a part of the National Theatre. They're helping support it. In this particular work, in order to make sense of this work, the audience go in wearing masks, and they piece together the experience as they move around the space. So the performance really unfolds through the body of the participant, as opposed to it being a pictorial image. But I want to know what happens in this experience. What is the nature of this? And what is the lasting impact if this is becoming an increasing popular phenomenon? And that's where my work is based. So my work is situated somewhere between those two extremes, between the visual art and fine art and theatre practice. These are my research questions. How do audiences engage with performance events that place the body central in its reception? How can scenography, the design elements, change or alter our perception of space? And in what ways might we model immersion in an aesthetic experience? And this is to grasp this particular term, immersion. So it's like, how can we understand this? So how have I gone about that? Well, I've created 3 major performance events in which they test different modes of perception and audience engagement. I've done this in a wider framework of action and reflection, to make something, to test out, to make the environment question a particular way of engaging, and to reflect upon it. These are the 3 projects I've done over the last 3-4 years. It's a part-time PhD. It's taken a while to produce each one. I don't have time to talk about each individual project, but there is some sheet going around, and there's a QR code on each of the videos. And if you want to find out a bit more about each of those projects, I've done a video to tell you about those. The main idea to get across here, though, is my method. So how have I approached this? Well, each one had a particular research question. I produced the work to test out a particular response. I've interviewed participants afterwards, I've filmed participants, and I've collected a whole range of qualitative feedback data. So far, I've got about 300 or so individual reflections, and I've been analysing this as I've been going along, and now I'm just looking at modelling that as a final analysis. So these are the core questions that drove the project. How attention and distraction works in environments, how, if we're inside an environment, are the design operating on us in terms of attention and distraction. Sensorial motor action, that means what happens when we move through a space. How does it affect our bodies, and how does that complicate or change the readership of the work? And then this thing, the dramaturgical immersion, which is more about narrative. How can story, play, and game make us more immersed within a particular world? And I think that's particularly where we're going to see a huge development in cultural industries in the next 10 years will be around about narrative and play in our lives. I've modelled this at the moment. These are the main concepts I've come up with. Upon reflecting, I thought this big term, mindfulness, as something that's quite unique. Often we think about being immersed in a world. If we're doing an action, we sometimes get engrossed in that action. Well, actually, I found that participants were very aware of their bodies. And actually, mindfulness leads to compassion within an environment. It allows us to think about how we relate to other people and the space around us. So mindfulness is a new way to think about modelling or understanding concepts of immersion. I'll show you how I've applied that shortly. So there's some other concepts there. The absorption, which is about how we become mindful and absorbed in an environment. Incorporation is about an active doing, how if we take part in an activity, we become incorporated in our environments. And then a journey, how can a journey through time take us into a deeper experience? So these are theoretical models. Again, I'm not going to unpack that more now, but these have been presented at conferences, and I've got recent publications coming out which document these findings. I'm just going to finish then today by just talking about the impact and how that's operated. What I've decided to do is split my impact into 3 areas: the local, national and international. The local impact in terms of what I do here in the school, in my school, which is performance. I've organised a range of seminars and research seminars exploring this, inviting academics and the company Punch Drunk you see earlier. They came up to Leeds, and we shared that work. So it's about my active engagement in research seminars. I've created a new collaboration between local agencies, so the Leeds City Art Gallery, the university, and an adults with mental health issues and learning issues group. And we explored these ideas in practice with that group. So this is a new collaboration. This is where we looked at mindfulness to think about how these participants can relate objects and themselves in space. So this idea then of self-reflexivity being central to a workshop activity with different groups. And then also my teaching. I teach on a significant number of modules within the university in my school, and I've applied those technologies, allow students to engage with those technologies to create new ways of engaging audiences. And there's been a number of companies and businesses set up from these projects I've done with students, and they've gone into the national landscape. My own national impact. Last year I received significant funding from the Arts Council to develop a new project. It's a very intimate project, which means small audiences. It doesn't really make money because it's about the nature of experience and how we relay it. But it got the Arts Council funding and will tour nationally in the next year. With this project also, it was selected, which partly contributes to my national impact. It was selected to be presented at the World Stage Design exhibition in Cardiff this year. So I was one of 100 selected, 10 from the UK, so represented the UK for National Theatre Design. And this was a really big achievement, and for me, within my specific field, the relationship to be able to present next to architects from Yale University or the designer of the Olympics was a great achievement. And I was fortunate enough to get quite some good coverage from this nationally, and there's a part of this was an award. So they awarded me the Best Installation Design Award, so from the last 4 years in the UK. So this makes a contribution, or recognises my contribution of an original practice that tests new ways in which objects and design engages in performance, and this helps position or notes it as world-leading in that field. There's more on my website, and you can tweet me to engage with the exchange a little bit further, but happy to take questions, of course.